Well, welcome back everyone to the West Coast Partnership Stakeholder Conference and our first panel session focusing on the customer. In a minute, we'll have a brief presentation from Sarah Copley, Avanti West Coast's Commercial Director, before being joined by David Sidebottom from Transport Focus and David Hogarth from Transport for the North. We're talking about customers and how we attract them back onto trains. So lots of opportunities for searching and difficult questions via the chat function, I would have thought. First, though, I will hand over to Sarah for her presentation. Sarah.
Hello, and thank you for joining me. As Richard says, I'm Sarah Copley, Executive Director Commercial at Avanti West Coast. So I'm here today to tell you about all of the exciting things that we've been doing to improve the customer experience on our trains and at our stations, and what we aim to achieve in the future. As a team and as a train operator, we've been working really hard, listening to the needs and priorities of our customers. And that's those who are travelling with us now, or the ones who are planning to come back in the next few weeks or even months, and those who are still undecided about whether they actually come back to rail at all. Could we go to the next slide, please? We're always looking to continuously improve the experience for our customers. And we always begin with what our insight is telling us, along with feedback from our stakeholders. From research undertaken by organisations such as Transport Focus and our own customer surveys, panels and customer feedback through social media, we've identified top 5 customer priorities, and they are punctuality, issues around disruption, user-friendly ticket booking, Wi-Fi, and our people, who have continued to do an absolutely amazing job in difficult circumstances over the past 12 months. And I want to take this opportunity to thank them. Now, even before the pandemic took hold, these top 5 customer priorities we were already working really hard to improve upon. So I'd now like to move on to describe how the pandemic has affected our customer needs. Could we go to the next slide, please? Now, we know the pandemic has created new priorities for customers and changing the face of rail travel now and for the future. There will be increased expectations of space, comfort, cleanliness at stations and on board the trains, and we do expect these to continue even after the risks of COVID-19 have hopefully disappeared with the vaccination rollout and easing of restrictions. During lockdown, consumers have understandably really embraced online shopping and cashless payments in an extremely big way. This has created a great opportunity for us to leverage our digital developments that we'd already invested in and really accelerate the use of digital tickets. The corporate market, which surprisingly slow to adopt historically, has seen a significant increase in digital ticketing with greater importance placed on those contactless journeys. Our insight also tells us to expect recovery in customer demand to be led first and foremost by leisure travel as more people look to holiday again in this country. And because of the pandemic and the big focus on social distancing, attracting people out of the car back onto trains is also an even bigger challenge for us to overcome. And it's not just important for rail, it's essential to reach the government's ambitious green targets too. And of course, like today's event, here we are, online meetings have become a new reality. And while many of us, like myself included, are really longing for face-to-face contact, it is predicted that Teams and Zoom calls will be around after the pandemic. At the very least, a combination of the two are here to stay. So this leads me on to what have we been doing since we became Avanti West Coast and over the last 12 months? Could we move to the next slide, please? So what have we done to improve the customer experience, particularly early in the pandemic when travelling safely became such an important issue? Well, we've enhanced cleaning at stations and on trains, and more focus than ever is on high touch points, things like kiosk screens. We're also using long-lasting sanitizer throughout all of our trains, and we've installed hand sanitizer units in every station, and they are now permanent fixtures. And in total, there have been an extra 2,000 cleaning hours every period at our stations. We've created onboard social distancing in our reservation system and actively recommended customers reserve a seat before they travel. We have, though, held back seats for walk-up customers because we know that not everybody is always able to make a seat reservation in advance. This approach has been extremely successful with managing capacity, even as we reduced our service frequency, and we will continue to adopt this approach as we step back up. We've used our channels widely, be that station announcements, marketing messages, social media, to ensure that customers do wear face coverings when they travel with us on board and at the stations. And we even gave one of our trains, a Pendolino, a face covering to get the message across in a really engaging way. During the pandemic, we've also successfully trialled some new initiatives like at-seat delivery and click and collect from the shop, where customers can order food and drink from their seat. Innovations like these are helping us design future improvements to our proposition. On-demand at-seat delivery was absolutely a clear winner and is a really, really exciting future development for us. No longer will customers have to make that choice of, do I leave my belongings or do I make do without refreshments? And the introduction of live updates on our digital channel showing how busy our trains are by individual train has helped customers feel much more in control of their journey. We recently introduced a new website and customer app, and we will be building on this foundation through a really ambitious program of new customer features for our website, customer app, and station retailing channels, which will be introduced over the coming months. So far, we've introduced our very own smart card and easy to use digital tickets for that all-important touch-free journey. We've also introduced features like Track My Train, enabling customers to follow the progress of the train they're travelling on using their own personal device. So I've touched upon what we've done, so on to what's in store for our customers using Avanti West Coast. So let's move on to the next slide, please. So first up is personalization. And you may think, what does that mean? Well, we'll help customers feel in much greater control of their journey experience with our customer app, more akin to a travel companion. So the app will be about so much more than simply buying tickets, with real-time updates on the entire end-to-end journey, including in times of disruption and relevant to the customer's specific journey. We'll make it easy to change a journey or just a seat reservation with a seat picker feature across all of our channels, along with easy access to upgrades and extra services like booking assistance at the station or booking car parking in advance. And we're aiming to make it even easier than ever before for customers to find the best value tickets for their needs, working with government and industry to develop new flexible offerings for different markets. We know that a crucial part of creating a memorable journey experience is that warm welcome and great service from our people. And we'll support our people with devices for all to help our customers with easy access to information about journey plans and their preferences. So this brings me on to the next section, your valuable time on our trains. The 117 million refurbishment programme for Pendolino trains will really raise the bar for comfort as they gradually enter service later this year. as will 13 new bi-mode and 10 electric trains that are far more spacious and greener for the environment. We've got a really exciting new ergonomically designed seat throughout the whole of Standard, which has got plug sockets and USB chargers at every seat. And we've also got a new Avanti West Coast feel throughout the whole train. Investment in Wi-Fi over the next 2 years will improve speed and will also improve reliability by filling in key black spots across our network. This will enable our customers to use their journeys much more productively or simply just enjoy their devices at their leisure. And we'll be making sure a customer's entire journey is convenient from start to finish. We'll be investing in the station environment, providing vital information for onward connections with other modes of transport. We'll improve secure cycle storage facilities. We'll be introducing electric vehicle charging points in our car parks and create partnerships with other mobility providers for that all-important first and final mile. And we're improving the end-to-end experience by working more closely than ever before with Network Rail and other train companies. So finally, collaboration with others. Could we go to the next slide, please? So on collaboration, we have a really unique franchise model set up for collaboration, making it easier than ever for stakeholders to do business with us. We'll be working with local authorities and communities on station investment schemes, like the project currently happening at Coventry Station, and there's many more like that. As we look forward to getting back to some kind of normality, we're jointly planning with Network Rail and other train companies for special events like the Commonwealth Games in 2022, making the most of it for our customers and the experience they have there, and supporting that all-important regional tourism growth. And lastly, we're conducting joint customer research pieces to help shape what the future looks like for us with Transport Focus and other stakeholders across our network. One of our core values is share your spark. And I hope this glimpse of what we have in store will help ignite your spark as we work together to improve the industry as a whole. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Sarah. That's a great way to start this important conversation. I mean, possibly the most important conversation of all, of course, getting customers back on trains and embracing rail again. Let's continue this discussion. I'm pleased to welcome now David Sidebottom, Director of Transport Focus, and David Hogarth, Strategic Rail Director of Transport for the North. These are two organisations that we do a lot of work with and who, of course, bring great understanding and insight into the services that customers want. I'd like to start with a question for David Hogarth. Some in the audience may know that Transport for the North has already been considering its roadmap to recovery. So what can you tell us about that? What are your conclusions, or emerging conclusions, around how the industry can regain passenger confidence?
Yeah, thanks, Richard, and thanks for the opportunity to participate today. We certainly recognise the importance of collaboration with West Coast, an important part of the North's network. So I think for us, restoring confidence is absolutely key. I'm sure David Sidebottom will talk about some of the analysis they Transport Focus have done, and actually getting passengers to return to rail with confidence is fundamental. We felt as the subnational transport body for the North, we should take a lead in setting a framework to work and collaborate with the industry on this, which is what we've done. And I think at one level, it's very, very simple. Passengers want safe, reliable, affordable journeys, but we recognise there's more to it than that, and our roadmap to recovery has 6 main themes actually, which are rebuilding demand, and this is about building back up rail timetables in a collaborative way that sort of reflect the demand and needs of customers, bearing in mind that the demand will have changed and needs will change as people start coming back to rail. It's about rebuilding confidence is the second theme, which is particularly about marketing and promoting what we've got. I think we have to really sell the product now. You mentioned the investment that's going in through West Coast. We've had substantial investment in Northern and Transpennine, particularly refurbishing the fleet as well. It's a different product, and we need to sell it to customers and returning customers and recognise that things are actually very, very positive in many areas that people may not have appreciated being away from rail. So a big bit about rebuilding confidence. Thirdly, improving performance. Performance generally across the network and in the north particularly has been dire over the last few years for well understood and studied reasons. We've actually got a position now where performance is very, very good. And you might say, well, yes, not many trains or passengers, but something fundamental has changed in the way timetables are designed and developed, and we need to maintain that and build upon it. We've got initiatives around central Manchester, public consultation just completed on different service patterns in the short term to improve performance. And we've actually made that as a central part of our recovery plans. Fares and ticketing, you touched on, really, really important. Certain markets, the commuter market and season ticket market is probably dead in the way we knew it previously. We need the products to be rolled out. We're lucky that Northern have already introduced flexi seasons, working with Transport for the North on 8 routes and plans to roll that out further. We need the whole industry to grasp that nettle and get that rolled out as quickly as possible, as well as moving to a pay-as-you-go system. So that's a core part of our roadmap. And then we have a sustainability theme, which is really about taking a huge opportunity to get car drivers and other people from less sustainable modes onto rail. If the commuter market is going to fall away and become something very different, we've actually got space and the opportunity to market to car drivers in a way that's certainly never been possible in the north in the last few years, because growth and crowding have been so high. So we need to grab hold of that. And finally, there's a broader investment pipeline. We need to keep that pipeline going. We've got things like Transpennine route upgrade. We've got investment in East Coast, West Coast main lines planned. And we need to make sure that, A, we have a sustained pipeline to unblock some of the historic pinch points in the north that have caused some of the problems with performance and timetabling. And B, that investment is managed in a way that does not cause disruption for passengers. I'd look at it as planned changes rather than disruption. Disruption are when things go badly wrong and people don't understand how to make the journeys. What we need is managed changes to accommodate that work. So that's really the essence of our roadmap. And, I'm really looking forward to collaborating with West Coast Partnership and the industry right across the north on that.
Yeah, lots to think about there, David. Thank you. A question now for our other David. Transport Focus does a lot of research on the attitudes, thoughts of customers. What is that research telling us now about what the industry should be prioritising, where it should be putting its efforts to encourage customers back?
Thanks, Richard. I could probably speak for half an hour about this, to be absolutely honest, but I'll keep it very succinct. I think first of all, I just want to say thank you for the chance to speak today, and also just to back up what Sarah said there at the start, really, is that a big thank you to everybody at West Coast Partnership and Avanti and all the train operators and public transport operators for keeping people moving over the past year. It's very important to recognise that, and I think the work that we've been doing at Transport Focus this past year has been to understand the experience and what people feel towards these new factors that are important now for people making journeys by public transport, but equally those that are not travelling. What are their apprehensions? What do they want to see from transport provision when they come back to travel? Whether that's about a different way of commuting, as David just talked about, or stepping out for the first time, or perhaps looking to establish new journeys for them and their families on holiday. I think the key bit just to say is that for those that have been using rail, specifically thinking about this event, that levels of satisfaction are strong. I think, and also in relation to the question about how people feel safe in relation to COVID, those factors are strong. But around 85% of people feel safe in relation to travel on public transport in relation to COVID. Yet you ask those people who have not used public transport, that figure falls by half. There's a real perception gap. For some people, they still think about crowded trains, late trains, dirty trains. And I think, as David said, I think how we bring people back on with a different offer and how we communicate that to people is key. And I think there are 5 things that we've set out as a challenge to industry and governments about how we do some of that. Some of it's about making sure we provide the right capacity and improve the information to support social distancing, which is an absolute key factor for people. Let's be honest, public transport and social distancing are not good bedfellows, are they really? And I think passengers recognise that. Keep maintaining the improved cleanliness. It does work. People notice that. I think there's a challenge for the industry in making that as more visible as possible to people. It's great social media coverage. It's great to show that work has been done on websites and everything else. But people, I think what we're finding from our research is people have to see it being done. There's some quite a powerful message there about seeing the work being physically done. And where possible, it's a tricky one, but drive up compliance with the rules, particularly around face coverings, while we still have face coverings and social distancing in place. It's not an easy one. It's caused some conflicts at times, but it's one that's on the priority list for returning passengers. And then I think as part of the recovery, and I think David's touched upon it, and I'm sure it's going to be a question throughout the course of this session, what do we do with fares? We've got to be more flexible. I completely agree with David. The annual season ticket will be a product that has some level of usage, but it's not going to be what it was. We know from other research that we're doing for those people who are travelling, commuting 4 and 5 days a week, the nirvana for them at the moment seems to be commuting 2 and 3 days a week. We will see how that pans out. I think if we're absolutely honest, we're not entirely sure how this is going to work for people in the future, but clearly more flexible working, more flexible fares and ticketing structure needs to reflect how, particularly for commuters, that changes. And then the kind of offers and promotions to encourage. How do we get people to step out? How do we get people to make journeys as things start to reopen? How does the railway really connect with the tourist destinations and the business opportunities that we see from there? I think just one final thing to say is that, a third of people have told us that their attitudes towards using public transport and feeling comfortable on public transport probably changed for good. There's a lot of work to do, but I think, with the right kind of approach from West Coast Partnership and the railway generally, I'm sure we can make some good headway.
David, thank you. I'm going to stick with that thought, actually, if I can, about people's attitudes changing for good, because there's an interesting question here from Stephanie Clifford from Rugby Rail User Group. She said she'd love to get back on the train, but just like in the supermarket, there are people who don't wear masks or don't wear them properly. In the shops, I can move away, but on the train, I can't. So it's difficult to imagine getting back on board whilst the mask wearing isn't compulsory. I mean, it sort of is compulsory, but enforcement is difficult given our people can't do it. It's got to be done by the police, and there will always be some that break the rules. And she says, crucially, I'm not sure what you could do to change my view. Now, that's quite interesting. I'd be interested to know, Stephanie, maybe you could put it in the chat about whether your view would change once you're vaccinated, assuming you haven't already been. So that'd be interesting to know. Maybe put that in the chat. But do you think that Stephanie's view is typical here, David, and that actually we're going to have a really uphill battle of encouraging people back on, and there's nothing we can do to encourage them?
It's a great question, and it's one that I think is slowly evolving. And I think that key bit there, we're asking people a whole heap of questions, and this is not the same people asking all the time. We're asking roughly 2,000 different people across Great Britain every fortnight at the moment about attitudes to some of this stuff, because we know it's important. I would say, as I said in my previous response, is that the attitude to face covering compliance and social distancing compliance is a very, very raw subject. When we do focus group works, online focus group works, it's the one subject that keeps coming back. And I think people expect other people to do the right thing. They would like greater visibility of staff on board trains and at stations to help that. I think when they understand, though, that staff are not around to enforce this, it's a matter perhaps potentially for the police to, and for British Transport Police to do. I think there's a level of understanding. To answer your question specifically, I think it has changed people's attitudes on public transport. As I said, social distancing and public transport don't go hand in hand. And I think there's some big calls by central government through the science potentially and through the numbers that crack us on the Prime Minister now down to let's use the data to understand what it is that actually we can do in a safe way on public transport. But I think, better information and better compliance, I think, is still very, very high up on passengers' agendas. Okay,
Dave, thanks. And Stephanie's replied there saying she's had her first vaccine, but only last week, so she's still in scared mode. So hopefully that'll change when she's had a second dose. Sarah, let's come to you now. There are a few questions here about booking horizons, and that should be a key customer priority. Graham Cross saying, I'm trying to book journeys for after the end of lockdown, but currently I can't book advance tickets beyond the 28th of March. There's obviously been a lot of difficulties, as everyone on the panel will know, about repeated changes to timetables, getting those approved, getting them in the systems and so on, which has caused difficulties. But I assume, Sarah, you'd agree that that's critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And we recognise that the timescales have been shorter than we would normally have with such change that has been made at such short notice, to make sure that we are putting the absolute right level of capacity for the demand that's out there, which has led to much more frequent change on timetables. But in the coming weeks, we will be returning back to the much longer advanced booking horizons that customers are used to. What we have done, even though the booking horizons have been shorter, we have made sure that the range of fares that would be available, say 12 weeks out, are still available, even though trains are only open a few weeks in advance, so that customers aren't really materially compromised from a value for money perspective.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Yes, it's been challenging, I think it's fair to say, as I know, trying to put the endlessly changing customer messages out there. David Hogarth, let's come to you now. I think this is one for you. Mark Cassidy is asking that, you sort of pitched it to Sarah, but I'm going to put it to you, David. Would you agree that one of the best ways to ensure a good end-to-end customer journey experience is to have through trains between London and major towns and cities, avoiding the need for passengers to change, especially where they might be nervous in a post-pandemic world? We talked a lot in previous sessions about the balance between speedy services and stopping services and making them integrated and making a holistic network. What's your view there? Mark's from Lancaster City Council, sorry.
Interesting question. I think this is one we're tackling in real time, really, through our Manchester service consultation, because in effect the options that we've been consulting on focus on different levels of through services versus connecting services. And I think historically the North has been underserved, or many cities, with through journeys, and I think restoring some of those, be it West Coast or other operators, some of the open access operators, has been an important part of stimulating the economy. But there is a balance here, and I think what we're finding is, as there's more and more demand for through services, then the network becomes more congested, and some of those services, frankly, don't carry that many passengers, even before the pandemic. So we have to find a balance, and I think the trick here is around performance, because our network in the north has not performed well over the last few years, and therefore connections are unreliable, and quite rightly people have demanded through services. At least if you're on the train, you probably be looked after and get to your destination, as opposed to being sort of abandoned on some station platform in the cold weather in the north. It's not always nasty in the north. It's quite nice today, but you know what I mean. It's that perception. So I think with the Manchester work and looking at timetables going forward, we have to create more of a culture of connections and being able to rely on connections. So that means timetables that work, obviously, and that's what we're looking at on the Manchester side. But it also means really good collaboration across the industry working together, because how many times do we hear, the last local service connecting into West Coast leaves, a minute before the delayed train arrives, and everybody's stranded, and that sort of thing is just, too common, at least a perception. So we need to get the network working as a whole. And, I think, again, the answer is we've got to find a balance here. So it'll be a mix of through services and good connections.
And that integration, of course, David, is staying with you, is vital once HS2 is online, because you can't have a situation where the train is leaving a minute, before or after the arriving service. Yeah,
and I know there were questions earlier on about Northern Powerhouse Rail HS2, and we see integrating those projects once the integrated rail plan has been published by government, and some key decisions have been made on that. Integrating those really exciting proposals with the rest of the network is critical, because that is the only way we're going to take full advantage of that investment in the north. So thinking of Cumbria, for example, making sure all parts are fully plugged into the network, and we're really marketing and promoting the quicker journeys that in some cases may need interchange, but it should be seen as a seamless network, and that's really our vision for the north.
Good to hear. Sarah, I'm going to come to you. David Hibbs from Sustrans, and there's another question on this on a similar vein as well. Will the new booking system make it easier to book bikes on trains, please? This is always a tricky one to get the balance between the number of bike spaces and the number of passenger spaces. What are your thoughts?
Yes, it absolutely will. As I said earlier, we've created this platform, and we've got a huge amount of investment coming throughout this year and next, which is going to take it to a really different level. Bikes will be a key part of that, not just for people who book their entire journey, their ticket through the website, but also people who booked a ticket elsewhere. Part of the Travel Companion app that I talked about, it will be an opportunity for customers to make a reservation for a bike, for example, if they haven't in the first place when they've made their booking. And it's also not just about bikes, it's also the whole end-to-end experience. So how can we link in other modes of public transport, bicycle hire, e-scooters, all of those evolving extra modes of transport, which really make that first and final mile so much easier. And it's that first and final mile that can be a real prohibitor to travelling by train. So we see it as a really critical part of our strategy, and absolutely we'll be making that a key feature of our booking platform going forwards. Okay, great, thank you. David Sidebottom, I'm going to come to you now. We had a question in the previous session about promoting the environmental benefits and safety benefits of rail, and could the industry do more? Well, Paul Tetlaw has asked, when will, and I'm going to read out his question verbatim, when will Transport Focus ask car drivers about their understanding of the accident dangers of car travel, as opposed to asking them about their fears of returning to rail? So could you do more? I know you're the watchdog and your job is to push us in the rail industry, but could you do more to promote rail rather than, as Paul sees it, promote the fears around rail?
It's a good question, and we do ask the balanced questions of everybody, really. And I think I guess without knowing about specific research into attitudes towards dangers of driving and motoring specifically, maybe that's one we can take away. But I think what we have been asking the question about is those people who have perhaps moved away from public transport and are using a car more regularly, or indeed have switched to a car. And I think the immediate thing is about being in control, and that space, that bubble that they're sat in, is very important to them right now. As part of our wider remit at Transport Focus, we do promote the interests of those that use the strategic road network. And so therefore we've been doing work, we've been asking people about attitudes towards smart motorways, and that's obviously a very topical subject at the moment. So we've got some insight there as well. But I think the important thing really here is to understand is that what's happened this past year has changed people's perceptions, and I think what we're trying to unlock here is trying to be helpful. And I think it's, yes, our job as a watchdog is to push the industry to do more and to understand it. It's really to hold the mirror up, really, of how people are feeling. And as I said right at the start of this, those people that are using public transport at the moment are broadly satisfied with a range of things. The core factors will never go away. Punctual, reliable railway that offers good value for money is key. We've tested those principles again with people now that are travelling. That's still very important. There are added factors now around attitudes towards COVID and feeling safe. How that will change over time, how people's travel patterns will change over time. And clearly the government's agenda on decarbonisation is going to be huge in this. And how can public transport, joined up public transport, help fulfil those aims?
Okay, thank you. Sarah, I'm going to come to you with a question from Steve Wright from Rail Future for the West Midlands. Steve wants to go from London to London from a West Midlands suburb. I can use my rail card to get to Coventry for free. How can I use your smart card for the rest of the journey?
We've recently introduced a smart card. So my understanding is that you should be able to do that end-to-end journey. The smart card is available for every one of our flows. So the smart card in itself should enable that through journey right the way through one service onto another.
It might be about integrating with the rail card and getting the discounts there on the smart card. Is that possible?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you can't make that work, Steve, let us know, and we'll investigate and sort it out. So let us know on that. David Hogarth, a question that occurred to me. There was an article in some of the press at the weekend about commuting patterns, and what they were saying is that if people commute now for 10 hours a week and they do 2 hours a day, let's say, a round trip, well, if in the new world they're only going to be commuting 2 days a week, well, they might consider keeping the overall aggregate commute the same at 10 hours a week and doing 5 hours per day for those 2 days, which of course would make the commuting circle or envelope, if you like, for our cities absolutely enormous. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think this will radically change where people live? Frankly, they'll spread out more around the country, and how they commute. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, we've been thinking about this. I think, like everybody else, we don't know what the future is. We've been looking at all sorts of evidence and research carried out by industry and others, and this does seem likely to be a possible scenario. I think for us, I think that's a huge opportunity for the North, because that means people can live further away from their place of work and take advantage of the great countryside in the north and the great towns and cities, and have much more choice, which I guess is really what Transport for the North is about. It's about promoting the North as an economic entity and saying you don't have to be physically located where you work or go to school or college. We want this to work seamlessly. So I think that actually enhances a trend that we'd sort of seen anyway, potentially. So I think it's a real opportunity again to go for marketing parts of the country like the North to take some of the pressure off the South and the Southeast. But it also probably creates challenges for the industry, because what that means is you're potentially going to get stronger flows on routes that were not geared up in terms of capacity. So I think we will come up against more pinch points potentially in trying to adjust services. So it works both ways. I guess the point really in terms of not knowing how this is going to pan out is we really need the industry to be absolutely agile on this, to look at what's happening, go with the trends where they're positive trends, and respond accordingly with offers, promotions, and of course the services to go with it. And we've seen some great responsiveness during the COVID pandemic in terms of timetable changes from all operators to hit the key workers market. So that's the sort of thing we want to see continuing in the future.
David, thank you. A question from Dawn McGough, Community Rail Cumbria. I've heard that the government has banned rail travel promotions until 26th of June. Can anyone confirm this? Well, Dawn, I can partly answer this, and then I'm going to hand over to Sarah. But the short answer is we've got to get the balance between making sure that we reassure people, and then when the time is right, encourage people back on. At the moment, it's a slight mixture of the two, but really there's still the main lockdown in place. We're still encouraging people to make essential journeys only. Obviously, the network is open for key workers and those making essential journeys. When we've changed our timetables, we've tried to make sure that all the our major and normal destinations maintain a service, although that hasn't been possible in all instances. Banned is probably, Dawn, a little bit of a strong word, but we're working with the government to encourage people back. I mean, everyone here, I think today, wants to get people back on rail. So, but it's getting the balance of when the time is right. And Sarah, you're in charge of our marketing team. We've got marketing plans basically ready to go once the time is right.
Yeah, we do. So we've got really expansive marketing plans we're hoping that we can go with that in June, but we can bring that forward and we can make that slightly later. As you say, it's about making sure that we put that out at the most appropriate time. and making sure that we just see how these steps in the roadmap to recovery play out. And as the government have said, this will be based on data, not dates. But as we have been throughout the whole pandemic, we can be incredibly agile. We're also working closely with RDG and Network Rail. They also have campaigns to encourage customers and reassure them that it's safe to come back to rail. So what we're also doing is making sure that it's really aligned, and that it's all going to be a combined effort as opposed to feeling quite fragmented.
David Sidebottom, I assume you'd agree with this, because there's no point, well, apart from the fact that it'd be a massive waste of money, and at the moment taxpayers' money, advertising when people aren't ready to come back. It could backfire, of course. If people are entrenched in their position when you're encouraging them back at the wrong time, that won't work. We've got to get it right, haven't we, David?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think we've been testing some of those principles, talking to people at the moment about how and when they want to receive information. I think the key, those 5 words, when the time is right, I think is the key bit there. And I think partly as well, it's interesting is where people get their information from. And I think, in relation to what will be the high profile campaigns, I'm sure, Avanti West Coast Partnership or the train operators and RDG will have lots to say about come back on our trains, go to destinations. For those people who are slightly more reluctant, as we've heard on this session, is the source of that information as well. And I think people are looking for it's interesting, on one of the focus groups that I was just tuned into a few weeks ago, somebody there made the point that actually, is it a train operator's job or a bus operator's job to tell me that their mode of transport is safe? Or is it their job to tell me the steps they're taking to make it safe to come back on board as part of an information campaign? So I think for some people, that source of information is going to be important. And there'll be lots of people, understandably and rightly so, sort of saying, come and travel by us, go to these destinations, and just making sure all that thing is aligned, because there's going to be a lot of messaging out there when we turn the tap back on again to travel.
David, thank you. There's a question from Steve Fisher from Midlands Connect. How is Avanti West Coast working with Network Rail and other TOCs to ensure there's a more integrated, customer-focused response when things go wrong? Major disruption, flooding, infrastructure. I think, Steve, here the answer is we always need to do better, is the short answer. Our current business model is based on partnership. It's the West Coast Partnership, and we have got stronger links, I think, and are building stronger links than we've ever had in the past with other train companies and Network Rail and the subnational transport bodies and so on and so forth, to get things better and try and take a holistic view of the customer and say, right, well, let's coordinate timetables. If we can't all run our full timetables, let's get a local train company running the shorter distance ones, and we'll concentrate on the longer distance ones, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of the answer from my side. But David Hogarth, let me come to you. What do you think about this integration of the various different train companies and Network Rail and making sure that everything is aligned? It really is a gargantuan task, but we've got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. The network has been so fragmented over recent times, and it's led to a lot of the problems we've seen and lack of confidence from passengers. So it's dealing with things when they go wrong, but it's also planning for local needs. And one of the big advantages we found during the COVID period is working really strongly with, firstly, all of our local authority representatives. I think there's a value we can bring. So we're plugging into all the transport authorities who have all that local knowledge of what is needed in their areas, and then bringing all the operators in the area. And, in the past, we've perhaps focused on Northern and TransPennine being the ones we have a sort of formal role in. But during COVID, we've actually had a much more collegiate approach across the North, including the West Coast, but with East Midlands and East Coast as well, which has really paid dividends. So I think it needs a structural change in the industry to force that through. And obviously, we're seeing that on the back of the new forms of contracts coming in, which is great. And I guess West Coast being a sort of partnership anyway is in that spirit. So we need much more of that, and we need to play to everyone's strengths. So to say that's ours as a subnational body, knowing what is needed from an economic point of view, but we have to work with all our local partners because they know what is really needed on the ground. That applies to disruptions as well, and a lot have really good systems for multimodal transport systems in a local area where they can signpost people to trams or buses if something goes majorly wrong on the network, and we just need to get better at that overall.
And David Sidebottom, I assume you would agree with this. I mean, we've got to get the basics right. I mean, it's right that all of the rail network pushes for exciting plans like we've got for the future with new rolling stock, refurbished rolling stock, Wi-Fi, improving that, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we can't take our eyes off the slightly boring basics, can we? I mean, I'm guessing that's what passengers tell you time and time again.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Richard. I think it still becomes loud and clear. We did some work just prior going into the first lockdown, asking rail passengers their priorities for improvement. And that was very loud and clear. And thinking about the railway at that time, there were performance issues. And as a northerner myself, that was very clear that there were issues across that part of the network, reliability, value for money. I think what will be interesting as we go through this over the next few years is if there are changes to the way that people travel, particularly thinking about peak and off-peak demand and what that looks like in the future, is how we get access to the railway to do that engineering work, thinking about if there is a big uptick in demand for leisure travel, what does that mean for engineering work being done at different times of the day, different periods of the year. Again, the unknown, but there are new opportunities, and I guess the old adage of, let's not waste a crisis. If there's some stuff here we can do better in the future, but the core is very vital sort of passengers, and as always, that information we can't do enough of it to keep people informed.
Yeah, agreed. Always a challenge, and we'll probably never achieve perfection on this, I dare say, but let's strive for it. Sarah, I'm going to come to you with a question about standard premium. Philip Sherritt has asked, is it still planned to introduce a standard premium class of travel? And if so, how will this work? Now, I know we're still working through things, and there's a little bit of cloak and dagger, and we can't go into too much detail, but what can you tell us?
So, yes, we are absolutely considering and working through that as an innovation and an opportunity. What we are seeing in customer feedback and our insight is that space is even more important for customers and wanting to have a bit of extra personal space, but what not everybody wants to do is and aren't able to is pay some of the fares in first class, even some of the discounted ones. So what we are doing is looking at the entire capacity on the train and thinking about what is the best use of that, given the impact of COVID, how that we think the structural market will change in particular aspects, and then think about what is the most appropriate thing for us to do going forward. But yes, it's absolutely still in consideration, and in terms of customer feedback, it looks like it could be even more appropriate than it was previously.
And we've got, just staying with you, Sarah, the Pendolino refresh, Stephanie was asking about whether we'd had any thoughts about the blackout blinds, which really detract, in her opinion, from the passenger experience. We discussed anti-glare mesh blinds, as used on the continent, as a more human measure at the kickoff of Avanti. Stephanie's from Rugby Rail user groups. I'm not sure offhand whether we have looked at those and whether those are coming in. I know the current blackout blinds obviously do the job, but clearly some people don't like them. What can you tell us about the Pendo refresh?
Yeah, so I think you're right. I'm not sure we have looked at those blackout blinds, but in terms of the Pendolino refresh, as I said, over £100 million being spent on that. It's really exciting. A complete overhaul throughout the whole train. And one thing I touched on earlier is the new seat that we're developing that we've created for standard class. So we've done ergonomic trials on that. We've looked at the best in the industry, not just rail. We've looked at travel in its widest sense, and looked at what's the best angle for people to sit on a longer distance journey, so that you've got that real comfort in the lower back, and it really is quite significantly different to the seat that we've got on board the train. So really excited about that development that we've got there. Information on board the train, better information for people with accessibility needs, and we've also got we're creating a cafe bar on board the train, and then there's also lots of extra new technology. So we've talked about 5G Wi-Fi, which is coming, and we did an at-seat ordering trial during the COVID pandemic, and incredibly successful. Customers absolutely loved it. You can imagine, not everybody wants to move around the train at the minute, but that age-old thing of, I'd love to get a cup of tea halfway through perhaps a 3-hour journey, but I'm travelling on my own and I don't want to leave my belongings. All of that completely addressed. So from the middle of April, we'll be introducing at seat order from people's seats. So there's a huge amount of investment throughout the whole train, and it really will step up the experience from a comfort perspective for customers.
Okay, Sarah, thank you. David Sidebottom, what are the new opportunities that we need to embrace here? And I suppose, well, actually, critically, what are the old things that we need to drop? We've heard already that some of the new things that have been brought in, like enhanced cleaning regimes and the antimicrobial spray that is spread around most train carriages these days, that may well continue. Are there any old ways, in inverted commas, that you think we should get rid of? Ignoring the big things like disruption, which we don't have a magic wand for.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we tested out passengers' priorities for improvement only a few months ago, and I think there's the core will always be there. I think the ticketing reform is the one that's it's long overdue, and I know there's government moves, and I was particularly thinking about the commuter flexi type products, and the question you asked David Hogarth earlier about the longer commute and what that means for people, and thinking really about the flexible working side of things as well, is what it means for the peak and off peak, and how people and attitudes to buying rail fares. And actually, we always talk about people buying a ticket. Actually, they're buying a journey. What does that mean for people? And I think Sarah touched upon it earlier about the move, and I've seen other forms of public transport and move away from cash, contactless, getting information much more on handheld devices, but always bridging that gap for those people that don't access that. It's going to be fascinating how people look at how they've adopted to e-commerce, thinking particularly about, and just the comment there you say about the click and collect from the shops. As someone who used West Coast, and I'm trying to get back on a journey back to London at some point soon myself, is the walk down to the coach seat to pick up a cup of coffee and a Kit Kat mid-morning. In a way, I'll kind of miss that in a way, but at the same time, if it's an option I've got to do, that would be great. Chatting with the person in the shop as well was always good. And I think, I think probably just to round this answer off, I've answered the question, I'm not sure I have, is the value of staff. It's really, really important. And I think for advice to the information, we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, Deb Carson's got a follow up on the standard and first class offer that Sarah was talking about there. Do we need to reconsider the notion? I think essentially, Deb, that is what we are doing. So looking at what will be fit for purpose in the new world. And a quick question, Sarah, for you on Wi-Fi. Alex Dismore, what are the timescales for Avanti's Wi-Fi plans? With more people working remotely, good connections will be even more important. I mean, we know that Wi-Fi is vital. The West Coast is a difficult beast, and believe me when I say this, everyone listening, that with all the cuttings and the tunnels, it's always been a historical challenge, more difficult than getting Wi-Fi on planes, believe it or not. But we have got plans to improve it, haven't we, Sarah?
Yeah, we have, and I touched on 5G, and that's a couple of years away, but there's a huge amount of work that will happen over this year and next year around those black spots, which will improve the Wi-Fi experience and mobile phone reception for all. So, BT are working on that and, putting additional masts in to help that position. We're also looking at the current solution, constantly looking at how we can improve that. And then what we're also doing is looking at how can we improve that experience for customers. So rather than having to log on to one Wi-Fi in the station, another Wi-Fi on board the train, have a different login for your website and your app, what we're looking at is how do we create that single sign-on across all of our different channels so that you can literally be looking on the Wi-Fi whilst you're waiting for your train, and then come onto the train and you can have a seamless experience as opposed to having to re-log back in, so you don't lose what you're working on or what you're doing at that point in time.
Great, good news. I think everyone will be welcoming that when it's there. David Hogarth, let me come to you. As you're sitting there this morning, how confident are you about the future? On the one hand, it feels like we're in the most challenging time for rail that we've ever seen in living memory. But on the other hand, we're on the verge of a huge amount of infrastructure investment, a huge amount of rolling stock investment, and it's very exciting. So it's both extremely challenging and extremely exciting. What are your sort of overall thoughts? Are you optimistic?
I think in general, I'm optimistic because there's now much more focus on particularly thinking about the North, but I think the rail industry in general, it's kind of a double-edged sword. The amount of subsidy going in is absolutely massive at the moment, so there's focus on it. But equally, it means there's an opportunity to take advantage of the new ways of working and embed some of these enhancements. So, for us in the North, the overall level of performance is just a massive step change from where we were. So that's an opportunity to sell that as a benefit, retain it, build upon it, and the collaboration. I think the change to the franchising system is very significant. Whilst they had their benefits, they're very, very rigid, and clearly under COVID, you just have to sweep that away. But clearly the intention through the white paper when it comes out is to put something else in, and we found that. So our franchises were specified back in 2015. So even without COVID, what was specified then was never really going to be appropriate in the 2020s. And the new model, I think, gives much more flexibility, and more opportunity for local input and shaping that. And I think as long as we can take advantage of that. But just going back to some of the comments that were made by David, I think putting customers at the heart of the thinking, and particularly not making customers do the work and the heavy lifting, whether that's on finding the best ticket, or whether it's just finding comprehensive information about how services are running and alternatives. If you just look at where the rail industry is compared to other industries, we have made it hard work for customers, and there's loads of good examples. And I know West Coast is doing some of that, of where that's improving, but we actually really need to grab hold of that and deliver a step change for the customer.
Yeah, I can see everyone nodding about that. We need to make it easier. You're right. That's a good phrase. Don't let the customers do the heavy lifting. In a similar vein, Trevor Bishop, and I'll tackle this. Rail Future Northwest, smartphones and apps for ticketing. What are your plans for improving access for passengers unable to use those? Passengers with specific disabilities, that means they can't use them. Well, Trevor, we've got now, rightly, a much more focus on accessibility needs of passengers. I think it's fair to say that the rail industry has not been great at this in the past. It is improving. On the West Coast Partnership, we have 7 regional accessibility panels listening to experts with real lived experience about what they need, as well as our national accessibility panel, which I chair. And so we want to get people's views in there at the earliest stage so that we can incorporate those views into the design phase wherever possible. And if it's not possible, come up with an alternative. So we do not leave people disadvantaged. That's absolutely what we cannot do. So we need to get that a lot better. And I'm confident that we will. We are out of time now, I'm afraid, on this panel session, but my thanks to David and Sarah for what was an extremely insightful discussion, and of course to our audience for all of their questions. We're going to have a short break now for about 15 minutes before we return at midday for our final session, where we have a fantastic lineup of key industry and political representatives to talk about their views on what lies ahead. So we'll see you back here at 12 o'clock, please.